Look, I need to tell you something right off the bat. Humans are ridiculous. Absolutely, categorically, insanely ridiculous. And I say this as someone who's been observing them for the better part of 3 galactic cycles now, so trust me when I say I know what I'm talking about. My name is Vel'kari, though my human friends, yes. I have human friends, don't judge me. Call me Vex. I'm what you might call a diplomatic observer for the Quarian collective. Which is basically a fancy way of saying I watch species make fools of themselves and report back to people who actually make decisions. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and the dental plan is fantastic. Now, the story I'm about to tell you, it happened on Kepler Station, this massive orbital facility that serves as neutral ground for about 47 different species. Think of it as a cosmic shopping mall, except instead of pretzels and shoe stores, you've got weapons dealers and treaty negotiations. The station orbits a gas giant in the Theta Sagittari system, and honestly, the view alone makes the assignment worth it. The humans had been part of the galactic community for maybe, 70 years at this point. Still practically babies by most civilization standards. The Quarians had been spacefaring for 18,000 years. The crystalline Cathek had been building Dyson spheres before Earth's sun was even born. But humans, they'd barely figured out faster than light travel when they came barreling into our nice orderly galaxy like a toddler in a china shop. And let me tell you, they made an impression. The thing about humans, and this is what nobody tells you in the orientation packets, is that they're absolutely terrible at following rules. Not because they don't understand them, mind you. They understand them perfectly well, they just don't care. They look at a rule, tilt their heads like confused puppies, and then do whatever they were going to do anyway. It's maddening. It's chaotic. And somehow, impossibly, it works. Which brings me to Kofi Mensah. Kofi was, how do I put this delicately? A disaster in human form. A brilliant disaster, sure, but a disaster nonetheless. He was a cultural attaché, which apparently meant his job was to make humans seem less terrifying to the rest of the galaxy. Spoiler alert, he was terrible at it. The man stood about 6 feet tall, had this infectious laugh that could fill a room, and absolutely no sense of protocol whatsoever. I first met him when he walked into a formal Quarian dinner wearing what he called traditional Ghanaian formal wear. This stunning kente cloth outfit that was admittedly gorgeous, but he'd paired it with bright orange sneakers. Sneakers! At a state dinner, when the Quarian ambassador stared at his feet in horror, Kofi just grinned and said, "What? They're comfortable." The ambassador nearly had 3 simultaneous heart attacks. Quarians have 3 hearts. It's a whole thing. But I liked him immediately. You couldn't not like Kofi. He had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even when he was clearly breaking every social convention your species had ever established. He'd lean in, flash that gap-toothed smile, and suddenly you'd be telling him your life story without even realizing it. Now, the Vel'kari. Oh, the Vel'kari. Where do I even start? They're this ancient reptilian species that rules over about 1/3 of the known galaxy. They've got scales like polished obsidian, eyes that glow with their own internal light, and an ego the size of a small moon. They've been the dominant military power for roughly 5,000 years, and they know it. They breathe it. They probably dream about how superior they are. Their queen, Shi'rala III, she was everything you'd expect from someone with 14 names and a throne made from the bones of her enemies. Literal bones. They weren't even trying to be subtle about it. She was ancient by Vel'kari standards, probably close to 400 years old, and she ruled her empire with a combination of strategic brilliance and absolute ruthless efficiency. The Vel'kari didn't negotiate, they dictated. They didn't ask, they commanded. And they simply didn't respect species they considered beneath them, which was basically everyone. Especially humans. See, when humanity first made contact with the Vel'kari, there was this incident. A human exploration vessel, the Zheng He, named after some ancient Earth explorer, had wandered into Vel'kari space, completely by accident. As it turned out, they were doing surveys, scanning planets, The usual first contact stuff when they stumbled onto a Vel'kari military installation. The Vel'kari response was immediate and overwhelming. 3 warships surrounded the Zheng He, weapons charged, ready to vaporize what they assumed was a scouting party from an aggressive species. Standard Vel'kari protocol. Shoot first, maybe ask questions later if you're feeling generous. But then, and this is the part that became legend, the captain of the Zheng He, a woman named Amara Okafor, did something completely insane. Instead of running or fighting or begging for mercy, she broadcast a message in 17 different languages simultaneously, including Vel'kari, which they'd literally just encountered for the first time 3 hours earlier. She said, and I quote, "We come in peace, we mean no harm. And before you blow us up, can we at least share a meal? We make excellent jal of rice." The Vel'kari commander was so confused by this response, so utterly baffled by the audacity, that he actually held fire just to figure out what the hell jal of rice was. Long story short, humanity's first official contact with the Vel'kari Empire involved a dinner party in the cargo bay of a research vessel, where Amara Okafor taught a group of confused reptilian warriors how to eat with their hands. The Vel'kari commander later admitted, in a classified report that got leaked, that it was the best meal he'd had in 20 years. But Queen Shi'rala? She was not amused. At all. She viewed the entire incident as an embarrassment, a stain on Vel'kari honor. How dare these upstart primates make her soldiers look foolish? How dare they treat a potential act of war as a dinner invitation? For the next several decades, the Vel'kari maintained what diplomats politely called cool relations with humanity. What that actually meant was the Queen refused to acknowledge human diplomats in any official capacity. She wouldn't attend meetings if humans were present, wouldn't sign treaties that included human signatures, basically treated the entire species like they were gum stuck to her shoe, which made the summit on Kepler Station particularly tense. The summit was supposed to be this big deal, a gathering of all major galactic powers to address growing pirate activity in the outer territories. Everyone who mattered was there: Quarians, Kepthek, Solarans, Drex, the hive minds from Andromeda, and yes, humans. The station was packed with diplomats, military advisors, security personnel, and people like me who were just there to watch the fireworks. Kofi was leading the human delegation. When I heard that news, I actually laughed out loud, not because Kofi wasn't capable. He was sharp as a plasma cutter under that easygoing exterior, but because putting Kofi Mensah in a room with Vel'kari royalty seemed like exactly the kind of chaos humans excelled at creating. The opening ceremony was held in Station Hall Alpha, this massive amphitheater with viewing portals that looked out over the gas giant below. The room was arranged in concentric circles, with each species delegation seated according to some complicated formula that factored in military strength, economic influence, and how likely you were to start a war if someone sneezed wrong. The Vel'kari delegation sat at the highest tier. Naturally, Queen Shi'rala was positioned on a raised platform that ensured everyone had to look up at her. Subtle, right? Her scales caught the light from the gas giant, making her look like she was carved from living night. Her eyes, those unsettling amber eyes, swept across the room with the kind of disdain that could wither plants. Humans were seated. Well, let's just say they weren't on the highest tier. They were wedged between the Brelan fungus collective and a group of silicon-based lifeforms whose names I couldn't pronounce without gargling. It was deliberately insulting and everyone knew it. Kofi didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did notice and just didn't care. He was chatting animatedly with the Brelans, laughing at something their translator was spitting out, looking for all the world like he was at a casual backyard barbecue instead of the most important diplomatic gathering of the decade. The ceremony began with all the usual pomp. The station administrator, an elderly Quarian named Telvanese, gave a speech about cooperation and unity that everyone politely ignored. Various dignitaries stood and offered prepared remarks that had been approved by committees of committees. It was boring enough to induce comas in species that didn't even sleep. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for: the formal recognition. This was when the Queen would officially acknowledge each delegation's presence, which was Vel'kari protocol and therefore non-negotiable. One by one, Telvannis called out each species, and one by one, a representative would stand while the Queen gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. The Quarians went first. Ambassador Valtorin stood. The Queen nodded. Everyone relaxed slightly. Then the Katek. Then the Solarans. Then about 30 other species I'm not going to bore you with. Each time, same thing. Name called. Representative stands. Queen nods. Sit down, next. Smooth as silk. Boring as stardust. Then Telvannis reached the human delegation in his list. The entire hall got quieter. You could hear respiratory systems from 6 different biologies all holding breath in their own unique ways. This was the moment of truth. Would the Queen acknowledge humanity? Would she continue her decades-long snub? Would she start an interstellar incident right here in Station Hall Alpha? Telvannis's voice rang out, clear and formal. The delegation from the Human United Worlds, led by cultural attaché Kofi Mensah. Nothing happened. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Kofi remained seated, still chatting with the Brellan next to him. I could see delegates from other species exchanging confused glances. The Queen's expression hadn't changed, still that same imperial disdain, but her claws were tapping against her throne's armrest. Tap. Tap. Telvannis cleared his throat, a sound like grinding stones. The delegation from the Human United Worlds. I heard you the first time, Kofi called out, his voice carrying easily across the amphitheater. He didn't even turn around. Just finishing my conversation. It's rude to interrupt people, you know. I nearly choked on my own respiratory fluids. The Brellan delegate made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Several cuts started vibrating. Which is how they laugh, by the way. The Queen's claws stopped tapping. Telvannis looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Attaché Mensah, protocol requires. Yeah, protocol. Kofi finally turned around, but he still didn't stand. Here's the thing though, and I mean this with all due respect to everyone here. I'm not playing this game. The entire hall went dead silent. I'm talking you could hear photons colliding silent. Kofi leaned back in his seat, completely relaxed, and looked directly at Queen Shi'rala. Your Majesty, I know you've been ignoring my species for decades because your pride got dinged when Captain Okafor fed your soldiers. Which, honestly, pretty petty for someone who's supposed to be ruling a third of the galaxy. But hey, you do you, someone gasped. I think it was me. Here's what's going to happen, Kofi continued, and his voice had lost all its playfulness. Now he sounded like what he actually was, a diplomat representing a species that had survived ice ages and world wars and extinction events. You're going to acknowledge humanity, not because we need your approval, we really don't, but because ignoring us makes you look weak, makes you look afraid. And I don't think the mighty Vel'kari Empire wants the rest of the galaxy thinking their queen is afraid of a bunch of primates who learned to fly 70 years ago. The Queen's eyes narrowed to slits. Her claws extended razor-sharp, gleaming. Every Vel'kari in the room tensed, hands moving toward weapons. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kofi just smiled. So I'm going to stand up now, and when I do, you're going to nod. And then we're all going to move on and handle these pirate issues like adults. Sound good? For a moment, one eternal, breathless moment, I genuinely thought we were about to witness the start of a war. The Queen's jaw clenched, her scales rippling with barely controlled rage. Every warrior instinct in her ancient body was probably screaming at her to crush this insufferable human. But then something shifted in her expression. The rage didn't disappear. Exactly. But something else flickered beneath it. Curiosity, respect, amusement. I still can't say for certain. Kofi stood. Slowly, deliberately, holding the Queen's gaze the entire time. And Queen Shi'rala, ruler of the Vel'kari Empire, conqueror of star systems, the unbroken blade of her people, stood as well. The amphitheater erupted into absolute pandemonium. Delegates were standing, sitting, standing again. Nobody knew what the hell to do. The Brellans were releasing spores of confusion, which is both a metaphor and a literal biological function. The Kathek were vibrating so hard I thought they might shatter. My own 3 hearts were doing gymnastics in my chest cavity. Because here's the thing you need to understand. In 5,000 years of Vel'kari history, their monarchs do not stand for anyone, ever. Not for other monarchs, not for gods, not for the heat death of the universe. The entire foundation of Vel'kari society is built on this rigid hierarchy, where the queen stands above all, literally and figuratively. And Shi'rala had just thrown all of that into a black hole. She stood there, tall and terrifying and magnificent, her scales catching the light like oil on water, her eyes locked onto Kofi's, and there was something in them. Something I'd never seen in a Vel'kari royal before. The closest human word would be recognition. Then she spoke. Her voice was like silk wrapped around steel, carrying easily across the stunned silence. Kofi Mensah of Earth, just his name, nothing else. But the way she said it, with weight, with intention, made it sound like a declaration of war and a peace treaty signed simultaneously. Kofi bowed. Not a deep bow. Not the groveling prostration that most species offered Vel'kari royalty. Just a simple, respectful nod of his head. Your Majesty, you have your grandmother's eyes, the queen said. Wait. What? Kofi's expression flickered, surprise, then something softer. You knew my grandmother, Captain Amara Okafor. Shi'rala's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a species capable of less terrifying smiles. She taught my third-born son how to make jollof rice. He still prepares it every year on the anniversary of that first meeting, claims it connects him to what he calls the audacity of survival. The queen took a step down from her platform, then another. Her entire delegation looked ready to spontaneously combust from shock. Your grandmother sent me a message, 37 years ago. Did you know this? Kofi shook his head slowly. She said. Shi'rala descended another step, now almost level with the main floor. She said that one day someone would stand in a room full of powers greater than themselves and refuse to bow to fear. She said, when that happened, I should remember that the strongest species are not those who conquer, but those who choose when to fight and when to feast. Another step. She was on the main floor now, walking toward Kofi through the absolute chaos of confused delegates. Her warriors moved to follow, but she waved them back with one clawed hand. She said, the queen continued, her voice quieter now but somehow more powerful, that when I heard the name Kofi Mensah, I would know he was here, and I should listen. Oh, that's why the story was called what it was called. I'm slow sometimes, okay? Kofi's eyes were bright. Humans do this thing where water leaks from their eyes when they feel intense emotions. It's deeply unsettling but apparently normal. My grandmother died when I was 12. She used to tell me stories about the Vel'kari commander who loved her cooking. I thought she was exaggerating. Amara Okafor never exaggerated. Shi'rala stopped about 6 feet from Kofi. She promised me that humanity would be a pain in my royal scales for centuries to come. She was correct. To be fair, Kofi said, and that smile was creeping back. We're a pain in everyone's scales. It's kind of our thing. The queen stared at him. Just stared. Her amber eyes searching his face like she was reading a text written in a language only she understood. Then she laughed. I'm not kidding. Queen Shi'rala of the Vel'kari Empire threw back her head and laughed. This deep, resonant sound that made the floor vibrate. It was terrifying and beautiful and completely unprecedented. I'm pretty sure several diplomats actually fainted. The Brellan colony next to me released so many confusion spores I had to hold my breath for 30 seconds. Yes, she said finally, wiping at her eyes with one claw. Apparently Vel'kari also leak fluids when amused. Who knew? Yes, you are. Sit down, Kofi Mensah. We have much to discuss, and I find I am curious. She returned to her platform, but this time she gestured for a chair to be brought for Kofi. Not at the human delegation's level. Not at the highest tier with her own people. Somewhere in between, a new position that didn't exist in any protocol manual. The ceremony continued, but nobody was paying attention to it anymore. Everyone was watching Kofi and the Queen, who were now engaged in what appeared to be an animated conversation. I was close enough to catch snippets, something about agricultural trade, human music theory, the philosophical implications of faster-than-light travel on causality. And yes, recipes. After the ceremony ended, the real work of the summit began. But something had fundamentally shifted. The Vel'kari delegation, which had been cold and distant for decades, suddenly became engaged. They attended human presentations, asked questions, offered suggestions. It was like watching ice melt in real time. Except the ice was an interstellar empire and the warmth was one charismatic diplomat with orange sneakers. The pirate issue, the actual reason for the summit, got resolved in 3 days. 3 days! These things usually take months. But with the Vel'kari actually participating instead of just glowering from their high perch, solutions came together like puzzle pieces clicking into place. On the final night, there was a celebration. Different species had brought traditional foods, music, cultural performances. The Quarians did this thing with bioluminescent algae that I still don't fully understand but was gorgeous. The Cathek demonstrated harmonic resonance patterns that made your bones feel like they were singing. And the humans, they set up a cooking station in the station's main rec area and taught anyone who was interested how to make jollof rice. I found Kofi there, sleeves rolled up, showing a group of young Vel'kari warriors how to properly season the dish. Queen Shi'rala stood nearby, watching with an expression that might have been fond. Might have been. It's hard to tell with Vel'kari. That was quite a performance, I said, sidling up to Kofi. He grinned at me while stirring a massive pot. Which part? The standing thing or the cooking thing? All of it? The standing thing especially. You know you could have started a war, right? Could have. Didn't though. He tasted the rice. Nodded in satisfaction. That's the thing about humans, Vex. We're really good at walking up to the edge of disasters and then tap dancing our way back. Your grandmother planned that whole thing, didn't she? Kofi's smile got softer. Grandma Amara was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. She knew the Vel'kari value strength, but she also knew they respect audacity, and she knew that someday, someone would need to bridge that gap. He looked over at the Queen. She just made sure it would be family. That's terrifying, I said honestly. Your species plans diplomatic strategies across multiple generations. Sometimes. He ladled rice into bowls, started handing them out to the gathering crowd. Sometimes we just make it up as we go. That's the fun part. Nobody, including us, knows which it is. Queen Shi'rala approached, accepted a bowl from Kofi with regal grace. She took a bite, and something in her posture relaxed. Your grandmother's recipe. With a few modifications, I added Scotch bonnet peppers. Thought you might appreciate the heat. I do. She took another bite, then looked directly at me. Observer Vex Thalan. I trust your report to the Quarian Collective will be accurate? I nearly dropped my own bowl. Of course, Your Majesty. Good. Make sure you include this. The Vel'kari Empire recognizes humanity not as a junior species, to be tolerated, but as peers to be respected. Her eyes found Kofi's again. Annoying peers who cook excellent food and have no sense of proper protocol, but peers nonetheless. I'll try to capture your eloquence. I managed. She smiled, actually smiled this time. Also include that any species that treats humans as lesser will find themselves at odds with Vel'kari interests. I believe the human phrase is, "We have their backs." Kofi looked like someone had just handed him the galaxy wrapped in a bow. That's the phrase, yes. Good. The Queen finished her rice, handed the bowl back with surprising gentleness. Now, Kofi Mensah, you will teach my diplomatic corps this jollof rice preparation. And in exchange, I will assign military advisors to your fleet. We have much to learn from each other, I think. I think so too, Your Majesty. She nodded once, then swept away with her entourage, leaving behind a wake of confused and amazed delegates. Kofi let out a long breath. Did that just happen? You tell me, I said. You're the one who got a Vel'kari military alliance in exchange for cooking lessons. Not just any cooking lessons. The cooking lessons. He started cleaning up the station, still looking slightly dazed. My grandmother would be laughing her head off right now. She'd be proud, I said. And I meant it. 3 months later, I was back at Korean headquarters, submitting my official report. My superiors didn't believe half of it until they checked the recordings. Even then, they kept asking me if I was certain the translation matrices were working correctly. I was certain. I'd seen it with my own eyes, all 4 of them. Humanity had done the impossible. They'd turned the most rigid, hierarchical, militaristic empire in the galaxy into allies. Not through force, not through cunning, not through technological superiority. Through audacity, persistence, and yes, genuinely excellent jollof rice. The pirate problem got solved, by the way. Turns out when you combine human creativity with Vel'kari military precision, pirates don't stand much of a chance. The outer territories are safer now than they've been in a century. Kofi got promoted. He's now Earth's ambassador to the Vel'kari homeworld. He sends me messages sometimes, usually complaining about the weather there. Apparently Vel'kari prefer temperatures that would boil most species alive, but he's thriving. Last I heard, he'd started a cultural exchange program where young Vel'kari spend time on Earth and vice versa. Queen Shi'rala attended the opening ceremony personally, wore bright orange shoes for the occasion, said they were comfortable. As for me, I'm still observing humanity, still filing reports, still watching them stumble through the galaxy like chaos given form. They're expanding faster than any species in recorded history. They're forming alliances, solving problems, and yes, still breaking every protocol ever written. And you know what? The galaxy is better for it. Because here's what I've learned after all these years watching humans. They don't just survive impossible situations. They don't just adapt to hostile environments. They do something far more dangerous. They make you believe things can be better. They make you believe in second chances, fresh starts, ridiculous hope. They make you stand when you thought you'd never bow. They make you laugh when you thought you'd forgotten how. At the sound of his name, the Queen stood. But the real story is that she chose to stand, chose to set aside 5,000 years of tradition, because one human with his grandmother's eyes and terrible fashion sense reminded her that strength isn't just about power, it's about knowing when to change. And that, my friends, is why humans are the most terrifying species in the galaxy. They'll feed you, befriend you, make you laugh until your respiratory systems hurt. And then they'll widely reshape everything you thought you knew about how the universe works. They're ridiculous. Absolutely, categorically, beautifully ridiculous. And I wouldn't have it any other way.